We used to joke that our annual camping trips were the only reason any of us stayed sane through college. A long weekend. Just the five of us, me, Tyler, Brandon, Jessica, Ashley, and Mark. No cell signal, no deadlines, just whiskey, indie playlists, and the evergreens of Oregon pressing in like we were the last people on Earth. This year, we picked a spot near the Rogue River in southern Oregon. Mark found it on some backwoods hiking forum, remote, barely documented, with a clearing deep off the main trail. He'd said it was untouched. In hindsight, that word feels wrong now. Nothing about that place was untouched. It felt watched. We parked our cars on a gravel pull-off around 4 p.m., hiked in with our gear, and set up camp beneath a wide, mossy canopy. The air smelled like damp soil and pine needles. Ashley hung solar string lights between the trees. Jessica handed out freeze-dried chili packets. Brandon kicked off his boots and blasted his dumb rainy cabin lo-fi playlist from a portable speaker. Mark stayed quiet, watching the forest line as the sun dipped low. "Think we'll see any bears?" he asked, not really joking. I laughed. "With your snoring. We'll scare off wildlife in 3 counties. He didn't smile. That night, around the fire, we passed around a metal flask, talked about life. Brandon had landed a summer internship at Lockheed. Jessica was still recovering from a brutal organic chemistry final. Ashley, who'd dropped out of art school, talked about opening a tattoo shop. I mostly listened, poking at the embers with a stick. Around midnight, Mark stood up, squinting into the dark woods. "You guys saw that, right?" "Saw what?" Ashley said. He pointed. "A light, like a flashlight, through the trees." Jessica turned, slightly buzzed. "Probably a ranger or some dumb hikers." "No." Mark's voice dropped. It was low, too low to be someone walking. We all stood up now. The forest felt different. Still, Brandon shut off the speaker. Silence. Mark started walking toward the trees. "Don't, dude. Seriously," I called out. "It's pitch black out there." He didn't answer. Ashley grabbed her phone to use as a flashlight. "I'm not letting him get eaten by raccoons." We followed reluctantly into the dark. The light returned, briefly, a faint, flickering white, maybe 50 yards ahead, then gone. "I told you," Mark whispered, pointing. We pushed through brambles, our boots crunching twigs and dry moss. And then, just like that, the forest opened up into a small clearing and we saw it, a metal hatch in the ground. It was almost flush with the earth, hidden beneath a camouflage tarp and layers of wet leaves. A heavy locking mechanism secured the hatch, but it wasn't military grade, more like something you'd see on a doomsday prepper's shelter. Brandon ran his hand along the edge. "This wasn't just dumped here. Look, there's ventilation piping, power conduit. This thing is active." I felt cold, despite the summer heat. "Mark," I said, "how the hell did you know where to find this?" He looked dazed. "I didn't. I just saw the light." Jessica stepped back. "Guys, we shouldn't be here." But Mark had already dropped to his knees, spinning the lock open, and it clicked. The hatch groaned as we pulled it open. The air that escaped wasn't stale. It smelled clean, filtered. Below was a metal staircase descending into shadow. A light bulb flickered somewhere below, still running power. Brandon turned to me. "You want to talk about weird? This place has electricity." Ashley bit her lip. "What if it's government, or like private military? And why hide it out here?" I asked. No one had an answer. We went in, flashlights sweeping side to side. We descended maybe 20 feet before hitting the floor. A narrow hallway lined with painted metal walls, like an old bomb shelter. Dust hung in the air, but it wasn't thick. No cobwebs, just cold, sterile emptiness. Rooms branched off the hall, small chambers with cots, shelves lined with canned goods, IV bags sealed in plastic. There was a working ventilation hum overhead. One room had a table covered in stacked maps and black binders. Another had a shortwave radio setup still powered on. Jessica walked past a bulletin board and froze. "Tyler," she said, "come look at this." Photos, dozens of them. Some old, faded, some recent. One showed a family of 4 standing in front of a green Subaru. Another, a teenage girl in a high school uniform. But the one that chilled my spine showed us 5 figures around a campfire, our faces blurred, but unmistakable. A message was scrawled in red marker across the bottom. He is one of them. Mark stared at it. That's photoshopped, right? No, Brandon said. Swallowing. That was last night. I recognized the stupid scarf Jessica wore. Jessica punched his arm. Too stunned to be mad. Who took this? Ashley whispered. No one answered. And then we heard it. A whisper not from any one direction, but all around us, like it was crawling through the vents. Soft, urgent, get out. Mark bolted back toward the stairs. We didn't hesitate. We scrambled back to the hatch. The forest greeted us with a breeze and the sound of swaying branches, like nothing had happened. No light, no whisper. We collapsed by the fire, our breaths ragged, no one speaking. Mark didn't sit. He just stood by the tree line, watching, and even though he looked like Mark, something in his eyes felt wrong. We didn't sleep that night. We tried. Sure tossed ourselves into our tents and zipped up like it was gonna make a difference. But none of us really closed our eyes, except Mark. He disappeared into his tent around 2 a.m., calm as ever, muttering something like, I just need to think. The rest of us sat in silence by the dying embers of the fire, glancing toward the woods and the invisible hatch now covered again with branches and tarp. Brandon finally broke the quiet. We should go to the cops, Jessica scoffed. And say what? That we found a Cold War hideout in the middle of nowhere with a haunted photo booth, Ashley whispered. That whisper, it said get out, right? I nodded. Yeah, it wasn't just me. Brandon shook his head. We all heard it. The forest creaked around us. Owls hooted in the distance, and just beneath it all, barely perceptible, there was still that humming, like distant machinery, somewhere beneath the ground. By morning, Mark was gone. His tent was still zipped. His boots were lined up neatly outside, but no sign of him. We called his name until our throats burned. No response, no footprints. Just the forest, thick, damp, and silent. Ashley was on the verge of panic. He wouldn't leave his boots. Not Mark. He's the one who told us to always dry our socks or we'd get trench foot. Brandon tried to act calm, but I saw his hands shaking. Maybe he went back down, to the bunker. Jessica grabbed my arm. We are not going back in there, but we had no choice. The hatch was still closed, the tarp untouched. I opened it slowly. The staircase was dark, no humming now. I turned on my flashlight and led the way down. Brandon followed. Reluctantly, Jessica and Ashley stayed at the top. We moved slowly, checking every side room. The cots were undisturbed. The maps were still scattered. The radio setup now dead, but something had changed. The bulletin board with the photos, empty, gone. Brandon pulled out his phone. No signal. Of course. He snapped a picture anyway. I need proof this isn't just a psychotic break. Mark, I called out into the halls. If you're screwing with us, this isn't funny. My voice echoed weirdly, like the space had stretched. I heard something shift behind one of the doors. A soft scrape. I opened it. Nothing. Just a broom closet. Metal shelves. Old batteries. Duct tape. But there was something carved into the back wall. Deeper gouges. Tyler was here. Brandon read it over my shoulder. Okay, I know you didn't do that. But what the hell? I don't know, I whispered. I swear. We bolted. Back at camp. The girls were already packing up. Ashley had tears in her eyes. Jessica had a multi-tool in one hand and bear spray in the other. I'm calling the sheriff when we get back, she said, and I don't care if they laugh in my face. We left Mark's gear behind. None of us wanted to touch it. By the time we reached the cars, my mouth was dry. Brandon checked his phone. Bears, 4 of them. We drove to the nearest ranger station about an hour out. Told them everything. The photos, the whisper, the bunker, the deputy on duty, a middle-aged guy named Harris. Listened carefully, taking notes. Then he said, and this hatch, you sure it wasn't just an old mining shaft or fallout shelter? Brandon showed him the picture. The deputy went pale. He excused himself and made a few calls. 10 minutes later, he came back and told us something that chilled me to the bone. There's nothing on record out there. But if this is some kind of installation, it's not ours. And the Forest Service isn't missing any personnel. Then he added, I've heard of disappearances up in that range before. Hikers, off-grid types, but never found evidence. You kids might have found something you weren't supposed to. We offered to show him the site. He sent a patrol unit, 3 officers, plus a drone team. We followed them back to the coordinates. Only when we got there, the hatch was gone. The tarp, the mound, the clearing, nothing. Just undisturbed earth and leaves. Even the boot prints were missing. Brandon freaked. No, this is where it was. I have the GPS tag. He showed them. They checked, confirmed. Same spot. No hatch, no stairs, no bunker. One of the officers pulled Brandon aside and asked if we'd been drinking. Another asked me if Mark had a history of mental illness. I shut down after that. I couldn't argue, couldn't think. All I could hear in my head was that whisper, "Get out." Back in the car, Brandon said nothing for half the drive. Then he asked quietly, "Do you think Mark's still alive?" "I don't know," I said, "but I don't think he's just Mark anymore." Brandon looked at me, serious. "You remember what the photo said, right? He is one of them." I nodded. Later that night, in my apartment, I pulled up my laptop. I started Googling disappearances in Oregon, cold cases, missing hikers, and one thread kept popping up, people vanishing near national forests, all under weird circumstances. No bodies, no signs, just gone. One case from 2003 had a woman named Elena Frost. Went missing while camping with friends near Mount Hood. I clicked on a photo. My blood ran cold because I recognized her. She was in the photo on that bulletin board. The same one in the bunker. I checked Reddit, hiking forums, local history boards. There were dozens of threads, all deleted. Archive copies showed people describing hidden rooms, strange artifacts, identical photos with red lettering, always the same phrase, "He is one of them." And every time someone posted about it, they stopped posting, vanished from the threads. No last updates, just silence. I shut my laptop, unplugged it, sat in the dark, shaking. Somewhere out there, Mark is watching, waiting, and whatever took him, it doesn't want to be found. Not yet. I didn't go to class that week. I didn't talk to my parents. Barely slept. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw Mark standing in the trees with that blank expression, like he was still Mark. But someone had moved the furniture around. Inside his head, Brandon called me 2 days later. "Did you delete the photos?" he asked. "Yeah." I said, "Off my phone, off Google Drive, even the cloud backup." "Good," he said. "Do it again." "Why?" There was a pause. Then he said, "I think someone's been in my apartment." Brandon lived alone in a studio near campus. He was the kind of guy who triple locked his door and always left the lamp on when he left. But when he came home that night, the lamp was off, the locks were untouched, and his laptop had a single new file on the desktop. You were told to leave. No sender, no metadata, no internet connection. Just those words in a notepad file. I unplugged everything, he said. Router, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and it was still there. I didn't know what to say. Something's watching us. "Tyler," he whispered. "I think it knows we talked." I met him at a diner the next morning, public space. Lots of people. We kept looking over our shoulders like paranoid lunatics. He slid me a printed photo. Black and white. Grainy. Us in the woods. This time from a different angle. We weren't looking at the camera, but Mark was, and he was smiling. We made a pact right then. No more telling people. No police. No ranger reports. We keep our heads down and pretend it never happened. If we see anything, we log it, but we don't post it. Not online. Not anywhere connected to a network. We called Ashley and Jessica to meet the next day. Jessica was shaky but agreed. Ashley didn't show. She stopped responding altogether. No texts, no calls, no social media. 2 days later, Brandon got a message from her Instagram account. No caption, just a photo. A shot of our old campfire circle. No tents, no people. Just the fire pit, still burning. He messaged her, called her. No answer. Jessica and I drove to Ashley's apartment. Her car was there. We knocked. No one answered. Eventually, Jessica found the spare key under the potted fern on her porch. Inside, Everything looked normal. Half-eaten cereal on the counter, a sketch pad open on the coffee table, a drawing of the forest clearing. Only Ashley had drawn something new at the center, a spiral of bodies, layered, twisted. At the middle was a shape, a hatch. Maybe the word open scrawled beneath it in red ink. We gave up and went back home. Jessica cried on the way, said she wished that she had never gone camping, that she hadn't let Mark lead us into that clearing. I tried to comfort her, but in the back of my head, I kept replaying something Brandon said. Something's watching us. That night, I had a dream. I was back at the hatch. The forest was silent. I looked down into the bunker, but there were no stairs, just a drop into darkness. Then something looked back at me. Not Mark, not a person. Something wearing Mark's shape, like a puppet, poorly filled, and it smiled. I woke up screaming. Brandon called me 5 minutes later. "Tyler," he said, "check your front door." There was a yellow post-it stuck to the center of it. "You were told to leave." I stood there for a full minute, staring at the yellow post-it. It wasn't curled at the edges like you'd expect. It hadn't rained. No one was in the hall. And my apartment was on the 3rd floor of a secured building, accessible only by key fob or buzzer. I pulled it off with trembling fingers. "You were told to leave." Same handwriting, same damn words from Brandon's laptop, but this time scrawled in pen instead of typed. I stepped back into my apartment, locked the door, and slid the bolt. Then I taped the note to my fridge like it was evidence, like it might mean something if I stared at it long enough. At 12 a.m. I got a call. Unknown number. I didn't answer. A voicemail came through 30 seconds later. I hit play. Nothing at first, just static. Then a soft, breathy voice I couldn't quite place. "Leave. You don't belong here. He isn't finished." Click. I called Brandon. He answered on the second ring. I got one too. "What did yours say?" "It was me." "But not me." I sat up straighter. "What?" "The voice," he said. It sounded like me. Same inflection, same tone. But it said, "Brandon's not coming back." And then it laughed. We didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, Jessica knocked on my door. She looked like hell. Pale, red eyes, clutching her phone like it was a lifeline. She sent me a video. She said, "Who?" "Ashley." The clip was short, 20 seconds. It was taken inside the bunker. We could tell from the flickering fluorescent light. Ashley stood in the frame. Her expression was neutral. Not scared, not angry, just empty. Behind her, the walls were covered in writing. Sharp, angular, like someone had carved letters over and over until the entire surface looked like scar tissue. She looked into the camera and whispered, "He is one of them." Then the video glitched, warped, and looped back. Jessica was shaken. "That's not her. That can't be her." Brandon joined us shortly after, clutching a backpack like he was preparing for a survivalist retreat. "I'm going back," he said. "Tonight." At first, I thought he was joking, but then I saw the look in his eyes wide, unblinking, desperate. He unzipped the bag. Inside were flashlights, food rations, printed maps, 2 knives, and a .38 revolver he'd inherited from his grandfather. Jessica looked horrified. "You're not serious." "I am," Brandon said. "I think Ashley's still in there, alive." "No," I said. "You just want answers. You think this is going to make it stop. But what if it gets worse?" He looked at me. "It's already worse." And he was right. We had already been marked. The question was whether we were still being watched or being lured back. That night, we drove. Same gravel path, same forest clearing, only this time, no music, no laughter. Just the crunch of tires on loose dirt and the ever-present hum of trees, whispering things we couldn't quite hear. The clearing looked wrong, like it had been rotated slightly. That sounds crazy, I know, but it didn't feel like the same place. The fire pit was gone, the logs were gone, but the dirt was disturbed, like something had been unearthed. Brandon stepped out of the car, gripping his flashlight like a weapon. I followed. Jessica stayed in the car, engine running. There was a mound of disturbed leaves near the edge of the clearing. We brushed them aside. The hatch was back, Same heavy hinges, same steel grip, but the lock was broken, snapped clean, like it had never been locked to begin with. We descended together, same stairs, same stale air, but it felt occupied this time. The lights were already on, buzzing softly, dim and orange. Brandon whispered, "They were off last time, right?" I nodded. I didn't speak. We passed the bunk beds, the maps. The radio room was filled with static, now playing what sounded like garbled voices overlapping, like 100 people speaking at once, in every language and none at all. At the far end of the hallway, we found the photo board again. Photos were back, but they were different, older, not our group. Black and white shots of other people, campers, hikers, rangers, all staring at the camera, blank-faced, all with the same red writing. "He is one of them. They brought it back. Some never left." I reached for one of the photos. Before I could touch it, a voice echoed from down the hall, low, croaking. "Tyler?" We turned, flashlights trembling. No one was there. Brandon whispered, "That was Mark." Tyler. It came again, my name, spoken in that same low rasp that didn't quite sound like Mark, but mimicked him just enough to make my stomach twist. Brandon raised the revolver. "Mark," he called, voice shaky. "If that's you, man, say something. Prove it." Silence, then footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming from the end of the corridor. I aimed my flashlight down the hall, heart pounding. The beam flickered, then steadied. Someone stood at the far end. The figure didn't move, just stood there, watching us. Then it took a step forward and I realized with horror that it wasn't walking, it was gliding. Brandon didn't wait. He grabbed my arm and pulled me backward into the radio room, slamming the door behind us. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "Did you see that?" I nodded. Breath shallow. That wasn't him. We waited, frozen. No footsteps, no breathing, just the soft hum of the old radio crackling. And then static turned to whispers. At first, it sounded like gibberish. Then words emerged, familiar ones. Our names: Brandon, Tyler, Brandon, Tyler, Tyler. Then another voice, female. This time, Ashley. Brandon looked at me, eyes wide. "She's here." We left the room and pressed deeper into the corridor. The lights above flickered again, buzzing like dying fireflies. The bunker's layout was different now. It shouldn't have been concrete, doesn't shift, but it had. Doors where there had been walls. Hallways that looped back in impossible ways. Brandon marked the corner with a piece of chalk, a big X on the concrete. When we circled back 10 minutes later, there were 3 X's layered over each other like we'd already passed here before, even though we hadn't. "Either we're stuck in a loop," Brandon muttered, "or the place is rearranging itself, or both," I added. Eventually, we reached a new section, a door we hadn't seen before, green steel, rusted at the hinges. On it, someone had scratched words into the metal. "You came back." Below that, "Not him anymore." Brandon hesitated, then gripped the handle. We opened the door. It was a large chamber twice the size of the others. No furniture, no equipment, just walls lined with photographs. Hundreds of them, some old, sepia-toned, some Polaroids, some printed on glossy paper. All of them had one thing in common: people looking directly at the camera, eyes wide, blank expressions, and written across every photo in black marker: missing, forgotten, found. Brandon stepped closer and yanked one off the wall. It was us, the 5 of us, standing around the campfire last week. Mark was in the center, smiling. But in the photo, Ashley was missing. In her place, there was someone else, someone I didn't recognize. Same clothes, same height, but not her. Just wrong. Brandon stumbled back. "What the hell is this?" That's when we heard the third voice, right behind us. "You shouldn't have come back." We spun. Ashley stood in the doorway, or something that looked like her. Same hoodie, same jeans, same long braid over her shoulder. But her eyes weren't right. Too dark, too still. She tilted her head. "You should have stayed out. You were warned." Brandon stepped forward, tears in his eyes. "Ashley, please, is it really you?" She smiled, but her lips didn't move naturally. It was more like a reflex than an emotion. They showed me what's behind the door. You'll see it too. Then she pointed to the far wall, a heavy iron door, far older than anything else in the bunker. Ancient, almost, engraved with a symbol that made my stomach churn a spiral, broken at one end, like it had been clawed open. Beneath it, in faded red, no return. Ashley said nothing else. She turned and walked straight through the far wall, not around it, through it, as if it wasn't even there. Brandon dropped the flashlight. It rolled across the floor, spinning shadows into the corners. I picked it up and looked at him. What now? He stared at the iron door. His voice cracked. We finished this. Brandon stepped toward the ancient iron door with that broken spiral etched into it. His hand hovered near the handle like he wasn't sure if it would burn him or if it would simply pull him in. I grabbed his arm. We don't even know what's behind that, I said. He looked at me, eyes hollow. We already stepped through the first door. Tyler, this might be the only way out. The handle was ice cold. When Brandon turned it, the entire room trembled, like something deep underground had shifted. The door groaned open, beyond it darkness. A hallway carved not from concrete, but stone, natural rock. Damp, mossy, old, too old to belong here. The air coming from it was wrong. Heavy, thick, like breathing underwater. Still, we stepped inside. We walked for what felt like forever. No lights, just our flashlight beams sweeping across uneven walls. Then something strange. The flashlight beam doubled. Brandon and I stopped. It wasn't a reflection. It was another beam, shining back at us from the other end of the tunnel. Then footsteps, soft at first, then louder, heavier, coming toward us. Turn it off, I hissed. We shut off both lights and pressed ourselves to the wall. Breaths held. In the dark, a shape passed us. It didn't walk. It dragged, like something wearing human skin but not built for legs. I didn't breathe again until the sound faded. Eventually, the tunnel opened into a circular chamber. The air was buzzing, a low, electrical hum, like being beneath a power line. In the center of the chamber was something. It floated inches off the ground. A perfect sphere, smooth, pale gray, crisscrossed with hairline cracks that glowed faintly blue. I couldn't look at it directly. My eyes kept sliding off, but I felt it watching us. Brandon stepped closer. The blue cracks pulsed, and something whispered not out loud, but inside my skull. 1,000 voices, all saying different things. We were here first. She opened it. He is still inside. You brought the seed. I stumbled back. Brandon reached into his bag, pulled out the revolver, and pointed it at the sphere. The moment he did, a sound exploded through the chamber. A scream, but not from a throat. Mechanical, alien, endless. The sphere flared blinding white and Brandon dropped the gun, clutching his ears. He screamed. Two. I dragged him back down the tunnel, flashlight swinging wildly. Behind us, that scream kept echoing. It didn't fade with distance. It followed us. We reached the main bunker corridor, but it wasn't the same. The rooms were gone, walls smooth, unbroken. Even the ceiling lights were gone. We weren't just lost, we were somewhere else. Then we saw the X, Brandon's chalk mark, but it wasn't on the wall anymore. It was on a mirror. A tall, human-sized mirror, framed in dark wood. We stared at it, and it stared back. Except, our reflections didn't match. Brandon's reflection grinned. Mine blinked when I didn't. They raised their hands before we did, then turned, and walked away. We ran. Hallways blurred together. Reality broke around the edges. Once we passed Mark. He stood at the center of a junction, smiling, but his shadow split into 3 directions. Only one followed him. The others stood still. Eventually, we stumbled into a familiar room, the comms room, where it had all started. The radio still buzzed. We slammed the door shut and barricaded it with a filing cabinet. Then we collapsed, both of us shaking. Neither of us spoke, until Brandon said, "She's not gone." I looked at him. Ashley, she never left. She's part of it now. What is it? I asked. What the hell is any of this? He stared down at his hands. I think the bunker isn't a place. Not really. It's a door. And we opened it. I swallowed. So how do we close it? He didn't answer. But the radio did. It crackled. Then a voice. Ashley's voice. Whispering, "You don't. You don't." Ashley's voice echoed from the radio like it was crawling out of a dying speaker. Static fluttered around every word. Brandon stared at it like it might come alive. I stepped back, spine pressed against the concrete. "She's dead," I said flatly. "Or gone. Whatever she is now, it's not Ashley." Brandon didn't respond, just sat there with his eyes fixed on the radio as if hypnotized. Then he reached forward and pressed the transmit button. "What do you want?" he asked. The silence that followed was worse than the static. Then came a reply, same voice, only now fractured, like overlapping versions of Ashley speaking in different tones. "Bring the rest. We're still missing 2. Brandon looked at me. "Jessica." My blood ran cold. We stayed put for another hour, unsure what else to do. I kept checking the entrance on our map, but nothing made sense anymore. The layout didn't line up with what we originally explored. Rooms were missing, some were duplicated, and every now and then, I'd glance behind me and swear there was a 6th shadow. That's when we heard it, footsteps from the hallway again. Not dragging this time, marching. Heavy, deliberate. We shut off the lights. A beam of white light swept under the door. Then something spoke from the other side, calm, steady. "Maylee, Tyler, you can still be part of this." I did not move. Neither did Brandon. We waited. The light faded. Eventually, we crept back out. The halls were quiet again, but the tension had grown thicker like the air had turned to syrup. We decided to leave. We had to. No matter what was going on, we weren't going to survive another night in that place. As we made our way back toward the stairwell, we passed the room with the mirror again, only now it was shattered. A dozen jagged shards littered the floor, each one reflecting something different, none of them reflecting us. Brandon knelt down and picked one up. His reflection blinked at him, then smiled with blood-black teeth. He dropped it instantly. "This place wants to copy us," he muttered, "to replace us." The stairs were close, and then we found the door. It looked like the same hatch we'd used to enter, but warped. Swollen, breathing. The metal flexed like muscle tissue, and veins pulsed beneath the surface. Brandon tried the handle, but it burned his hand, left a black mark across his palm. "We're not getting out this way," he said through clenched teeth. That's when we heard Jessica's voice from deep inside the corridor we'd just come from. "Guys, Tyler, Brandon." She sounded scared. I looked at Brandon. It could be a trick, or it could be her. We hesitated. Then she screamed. Raw, terrified, real. And that was all it took. We ran toward the sound. Winding turns, disappearing doors, corridors looping in impossible ways. It was like the bunker wanted us to get lost now. And we did. We found ourselves back in the room with the sphere of the floating object we had seen days ago. Except this time, it wasn't dormant. It had grown twice the size. Cracks glowing deep orange now. Energy pulsing like a heartbeat. And standing beside it, Jessica. But she wasn't alone. Ashley was with her. Brandon raised the revolver again. "Don't," I said. "Look at her." Because Jessica's face was blank. Not scared, not surprised, just resigned. She turned to Ashley and took her hand. "Why?" Brandon asked, voice cracking. Jessica blinked slowly. "There's no why left. This place doesn't need reasons." Then Ashley whispered, "He is one of them now." And that's when Brandon turned to me, eyes blank, smile spreading. He pointed the gun, not at them, at me. "Brandon," I whispered. "Don't." He didn't blink, didn't twitch, didn't even look like Brandon anymore. He held the gun steady, but the hand behind it shook like something was trying to control him, but didn't quite understand how muscles worked. Ashley and Jessica stood still behind him, their silhouettes glowing slightly in the orange light from the expanding sphere. I took a slow step back, then another. "You don't have to do this," I said. "You're stronger than this thing." The smile on Brandon's face cracked just a little, enough to see his lip twitch. "I'm tired," he said, but the voice wasn't his, not fully. "You all are." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the only thing I had left, the photo, the one we'd found earlier in the bunker, of the 5 of us, before everything fell apart. I held it up. This is us. Brandon. This is real. He blinked. His hands wavered. For a second, I thought it was over. Then Jessica stepped forward. Put it down, she said, cold and flat. Brandon's smile returned wider now. Stretched. The revolver lowered. Slowly, mechanically, he stepped aside. I remember you, he whispered to me, just before his eyes glazed over again. And then he turned and walked toward the sphere. Ashley and Jessica followed. They moved like dancers, graceful, slow, entranced. The sphere pulsed again louder. Its surface cracked wider, revealing something underneath. Not mechanical, not natural, alive. Pale limbs shifting under the shell, a blinking eye, a mouth, or something that looked like one. Stretching open, they stood before it, hands joined, and began to hum, low, monotonous, like a ritual. I backed away, didn't run, not yet, just watched as the three of them dissolved. That's the only way I can describe it. Their skin shimmered, peeled, then turned to light orange and red like cinders in the dark, then gone, swallowed into the orb. Brandon last. He looked back at me and winked, then vanished. The sphere dimmed, cracks sealed, silence returned, and I stood alone. I don't remember how I got back to the surface. One moment, I was in the bunker. The next, I was crawling through the wet underbrush, coughing up mud and blood, screaming into morning light. The hatch was gone, just moss and rocks now. No sign of what we found, no sign of them. The ranger who found me said I was lucky to be alive. He didn't ask why I was bleeding or why my clothes were torn or why I kept screaming Ashley's name. He just handed me water and said, "You're not the first." I didn't ask what he meant. I was afraid of the answer. The police didn't believe me. Of course. They said our campsite had been found empty, that the bunker didn't exist, that Brandon, Jessica, Ashley and even Mark were listed as presumed missing during a wilderness accident. But there were no bodies, no proof. Just me. I kept the photo. It's changed now. Not a lot. Just little things. Jessica's face is missing. Ashley's braid is reversed. Brandon is blurry, like he was never in focus. And me, I'm in the photo, but I'm not looking at the camera anymore. I'm looking at myself. From behind, the police dropped me off at the trailhead with a bland warning about staying safe next time. No real questions, no follow-up. They didn't even take the photo I offered them. I walked back to my car in silence, the weight of everything pressing down like water on my chest. The forest behind me stood quiet, unbothered, like it hadn't swallowed 4 of my friends whole. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, just breathing, just existing. The photo sat on the dash. It kept changing. Now I looked blurry. 2 days later, I got a message. No number, no name, just a text. You opened it. I threw my phone out the window. Didn't matter. That night, the dream started again. I dreamt of the bunker, of halls that stretched into infinity, of the sphere pulsing and cracking open like an egg filled with stars, and of Brandon's face, whispering things I couldn't remember when I woke. But I felt them, like a seed planted in my brain, blooming in the dark. The next day, a package arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside, a single Polaroid, me sleeping in my bed. On the back, written in red marker, "You were never supposed to leave." I didn't call the cops. I knew what they'd say. I just locked all the doors, covered every mirror in the apartment, taped them down, just in case. And then I made a decision. If the bunker wanted me back, if they were still down there, I'd go find it again. Not to join them, to end it. I drove back up to Oregon 2 days later. Different trail. I didn't want to risk being followed. The forest felt different this time, like it knew me, like it had been waiting. I hiked for hours, days maybe. Time started losing shape, but eventually I found it, or rather it found me. Same place, same rocky clearing. Only this time, the hatch wasn't sealed. It was wide open. Breathing, I climbed down into the dark, flashlight in one hand, revolver in the other. I'd reloaded it just in case. The hallways were quieter now, clean, even, no signs of struggle. No scattered gear, no ash where Brandon or Jessica had vanished. Just smooth walls and silence. I passed rooms that didn't exist before. A classroom, empty desks, a chalkboard scrawled with formulas that made my eyes hurt, a hospital ward, beds freshly made, and a child's playroom, all pristine, all wrong. Eventually, I found a new corridor. The walls were lined with mirrors, each one showing a different version of me. Older, younger, angry, dead. One smiled, then winked, then raised a hand and waved. I turned away fast. Didn't want to know what would happen if I waved back. At the corridor's end stood another door. Plain wood, a single symbol etched into the grain. That broken spiral. I stepped through, and I saw it. The sphere, alive, glowing, shifting, bigger than before. It pulsed like a heart, a rhythm, almost musical. In front of it, Mark. He turned, smiled. I knew you'd come back. His eyes were too wide, his skin too smooth. Where are the others? I asked. He just shrugged. Part of it now? Like I am. Like you will be. I raised the revolver. You don't belong here, I said. Neither do you, he replied. And then the sphere screamed. I don't know how else to describe it. The sphere screamed. Not a sound from any mouth. It was a pressure. A shuddering, cosmic shriek that hit every nerve in my body, like it was speaking through my spine, through reality itself. The walls vibrated. The mirrors behind me shattered. The entire room flickered like a strobe light, but instead of white, it pulsed with a deep blood red. Mark didn't flinch. He just kept smiling. They're awake, he said, and they're hungry. I fired the gun, once, twice, straight into his chest. Mark jerked and stumbled back, and laughed. No blood, no wound. He looked down at the smoking holes in his shirt and said, You think bullets mean anything here? He lunged. I barely dodged, rolled across the smooth floor, the gun skidding away. Mark wasn't moving like a person anymore. He twitched jerky and disjointed like his bones weren't aligned properly, like something was piloting him without reading the manual. I scrambled back toward the entrance, but it was gone. No door, just wall, no seams, no escape. Stop fighting, he hissed. His voice was layered now, multiple tones speaking at once. You opened the gate, you let them in. They just want to make you part of the network. Network. I choked. Mark tilted his head. Not the internet, not data. Consciousness, shared across time, space, identity. He stepped toward me. The bunker was never built. It grew. Like a root system, it finds those who are open, who listen, who leave the door cracked. I grabbed a broken shard of mirror from the floor and hurled it at his face. He screamed not from pain, from recognition. The mirror hit his cheek, and his body began to ripple, like heat waves over asphalt. The smile dropped. For a second, I saw what was underneath. Not human, a shape too wide for skin. It reared back, and I ran. No plan. No gun, just panic. And somehow, the halls began to change around me, doors opening where there were none, stairs descending endlessly. At some point, I tripped and tumbled down a metal slope, hit my head. Everything went black. When I came to, I was somewhere new. Not the bunker, not the forest, just white, blindingly white. A smooth, round room with no corners. In the center, the sphere, but smaller now, dormant, floating still, no sound, and beside it another me. He looked up and smiled. Hi, Tyler. He had my face, my clothes, even the small scar on my left hand from when I burned myself as a kid. But his eyes were calm, too calm. You're still resisting, he said. I did too. First time. What is this? The convergence chamber, he replied. This is where it all ends, where you end. He stepped closer, but not in a bad way. You'll just stop being separate. Separate from what? He leaned in. Everything. The walls began to glow, dimly at first, then pulsing, echoing the rhythm of my heart. I could feel it again, that pull. The invitation, not with words, not even with thoughts, just a sense that I could let go. Let the pain, the memories, the fear all melt away. Be one of them. No more loneliness. No more guilt. No more me. And God help me, I almost did it. But then something flickered at the edge of my vision. The photo, still in my pocket, still real. I pulled it out, held it in front of him, my double. "You remember this?" He stared at it, and for the first time, looked uncertain. That was all I needed. I ran, clutching the photo like a relic. I slammed my shoulder into the wall, screamed, fought, begged, and some part of the bunker that hadn't been completely consumed opened a door. I burst through and didn't stop running. Through corridors, through shadows, through something that hissed my name in Brandon's voice, until, finally, light and trees and cold Oregon air. I don't remember the drive home, only that when I reached my apartment, the photo was still in my hand, and for the first time in weeks, all 5 of us were in it again. But none of us were looking at the camera. We were all looking at me. I kept the photo taped to my wall. I don't know why. Maybe to remind myself it happened. Maybe because I was afraid to throw it out, afraid of what might come crawling back if I pretended it didn't exist. But it didn't sit still anymore. Some nights, I'd wake up to find Brandon's eyes looking left instead of right, or Jessica missing entirely, or the background changing from a forest to some impossible place where the trees bent inward like a throat. Every morning, I checked it. Every morning, it was worse. I stopped sleeping. I stopped going to work. I started researching, not about bunkers, not about missing hikers, but about identity drift. It's a fringe theory. You won't find it in medical journals, but it's out there. On obscure forums, PDF dumps, redacted case files leaked from defense research labs. It's the idea that yourself isn't fixed, that there are layers, versions of you split across timelines, kept loosely in sync by what some call conscious anchors. And when those anchors break, when you see too much of yourself, you start to unravel. That's what the bunker does. It makes you remember versions of yourself you were never meant to know. I found another one. Another bunker, not in Oregon. This one was mentioned in a lost hiker report out of New Hampshire. The hiker was found weeks later rambling nonsense, talking about mirrored halls and the eye that sees sideways. He died in a psych hospital. His final note read, "I met myself in the cold. He told me I was already dead. I bought a plane ticket, rented a car, drove into the White Mountains and camped near the coordinates he mentioned. Nothing for 3 nights, just cold, pine sap, and wind. But on the 4th night I heard it, a low hum, mechanical, exactly like before, like the sphere. I followed it into the trees, and there it was, another hatch, not metal this time, wooden, but reinforced, like an old bomb shelter. There was no lock. It wanted to be opened. Inside, it was the same, but different. No rust, no moss, just clean halls and walls that shimmered like glass. A long corridor led down deeper than any man-made structure should go. I walked for what felt like hours. No branches, no stairs, just one long slope downward, like slipping into a throat. And all the while, I heard them, voices, not calling out for help, calling out to me. One sounded like Ashley, another like my mom, another like me, singing a lullaby I didn't know I remembered. At the bottom was a chamber, no sphere this time, just a mirror, 10 feet tall, gilded edges, and inside it me, but not like the one in Oregon. This one wasn't smiling. He was screaming, mouth wide, hands pressed to the glass, and as I stared he stopped, looked straight at me, then pointed over my shoulder. I turned. There were 3 of them, Jessica, Brandon, Mark, their eyes all solid black now, their skin faintly glowing with the light of the bunker's veins pulsing through them. They didn't speak. They just watched, as if waiting for me to choose. "You can still leave," Brandon finally said, "but next time, you won't remember which version you are." I backed up toward the mirror. The reflection screamed again, but now I understood. It wasn't trying to escape. It was warning me. This wasn't a choice. It was an exchange. If I stepped in, he would get out. So I ran, again, back up the slope. The voices chased me, whispering memories I'd never lived, dates that never happened, a funeral for a sister I never had. I made it out before dawn, collapsed in the dirt, coughing blood, and the hatch, gone. Now, I don't know who I am anymore. Sometimes I catch myself writing in a handwriting that isn't mine, or waking up with bruises I can't explain. Once, I looked in the mirror and for a moment, I wasn't there, just empty space. Then a smile blinked into place. Mean, but not mine. And the photo, it's back to normal now. All 5 of us, smiling, looking at the camera. But now, there's a 6th shadow just behind me. Grinning, I burned the photo, watched the edges curl and blacken in my kitchen sink, the faces vanishing into ash. I expected to feel relief, like I'd exorcised something, cut off a limb to stop the spread. But the next morning, it was back, taped to my fridge. No tape, no burn marks, just there. Except now, I was missing from it. That day, I checked into a motel under a fake name, tossed my phone in a lake, shaved my beard, changed clothes, left everything behind. If the bunker couldn't find me, maybe the others wouldn't either. For a while, it worked. No whispers, no flickering lights, no altered photos. But then I saw the man at the gas station. He looked exactly like Brandon. Same jacket, same scar on his chin. But when I called out to him, he just smiled and walked into the woods. I followed him, not far, just to the edge of the tree line. There, scratched into the bark of a cedar, were 3 words. It's still open. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the motel chair with a knife in one hand and my reflection in the mirror. It kept lagging behind. 1 second, then 2, then it blinked, while I didn't. The next morning, someone slipped an envelope under the door. Inside, a map, hand-drawn. The Oregon forest again, but deeper this time. Marked with an X and a date. Tomorrow. I should have ignored it. Should have run. Instead, I drove like something was pulling me forward. The trail was worse than before. Overgrown, narrow. Eventually, I had to leave the car behind and hike. Hours passed. I started to hear that hum again. The sphere's frequency deep in my bones. I arrived just before dusk. The hatch was back. Metal, seamless, just like the first time. Only this time, it was already open. And inside, someone was waiting. Not Mark, not Brandon. Sitting cross-legged in the middle of the entrance. He didn't speak, just nodded, as if to say, "You know what this is?" I approached cautiously, heart pounding. He held out a piece of paper. I took it. It was a list. Dates, names, locations, all the missing people I'd found during my research. Except at the bottom, written in block letters, was final anchor point. Tyler Coleman. That's my name. That's me. He pointed down the corridor and vanished. I walked forward. There was no light this time. No doors. No mirrors. Just a tunnel that stretched into the dark. And then, suddenly, walls began to shimmer again. Flicker with images. I saw my friends before the trip. Brandon at the bar. Ashley laughing at her easel. Jessica sleeping on the train to Portland. Mark standing in front of the bunker. But something was off. The movements were too smooth. Like watching puppets reenact memories. Then I saw myself, alone in a hospital bed. Monitors beeping. Doctors speaking in hushed tones. One leaned over me and whispered, "He's still inside." Another asked, "What if he doesn't want to come out?" The images faded. I stumbled forward, more questions than breath left in my chest. And then I reached it. A final door. The same spiral carved into the center. But this time, it pulsed with light, almost inviting. I placed my hand on the metal. It was warm. It remembered me. And then, for the first time since that trip began, I heard a familiar voice. My own. "You were never meant to escape." The door opened without a sound, just a shift in the air, like a breath exhaled from behind the veil of reality. The darkness beyond wasn't empty, it was thick. Not just the absence of light, but the presence of something that absorbed it, something that waited. I stepped through. Immediately, the pressure changed. My ears popped, my vision blurred, and then everything snapped into focus. I was in the same circular chambers before, but it had grown, expanded outward into a space that couldn't physically exist in the dimensions we know. Floating in the center was no longer a sphere. It was a shape-shifting, unstable, constantly rewriting itself, a tessellation of impossible angles. glinting like glass, breathing like an animal. It felt like looking directly into math. Ancient, sacred, alien, and standing before it were all of us. Me, every version I'd glimpsed in mirrors, dreams, hallucinations. Tyler with a scar down his face. Tyler in military gear. Tyler dressed in hospital scrubs. Even one of me with no mouth, staring back with hollow sockets. They turned when I entered, spoke in unison. Final anchor identified. Collapse can now begin. I froze. Collapse of what? The room trembled. Of boundary. Of self. Of you. One of the other Tylers stepped forward, scarred-faced Tyler. You opened it, he said. You came back. That's what it needed. I don't understand. It doesn't matter. None of us do. We just are. And soon we'll be one. He reached out, tried to touch me. I pulled back, but his hand passed through my chest. Memories that weren't mine flooded in. A life in Kansas. A wife named Lila. A car accident on a rainy highway. Then another suffocating in a submarine. Dying alone. Then another standing at the edge of a burning cornfield. Holding a shotgun. Flashes of lives I never lived. Pain I never felt. Love I never earned. All bleeding into me. I'm not you, I shouted, but my voice echoed strangely. Some of them were starting to fade. Others were merging. 2 Tylers stepped into each other and became one. Then 3 more. One screamed as it dissolved into particles of static and sound. The room was collapsing. No, the concept of the room was the architecture peeled away like old film stock, revealing stars beneath. A starless, watching void. The shape in the center pulsed once, and all at once I knew. It was never a bunker. It was never a facility. It was a seed, planted to sprout convergence, to gather the strands of self across dimensions and bind them together. A cosmic spindle threading identity into unity, and I was the last thread. I backed away, but there was no wall now, no door, no exit, just infinite falling outward, and then myself closing in, not to kill me, to absorb me, to complete me. One Tyler reached me, smiled gently. You'll forget soon, but you'll be better, stronger. You won't wake up screaming anymore. His hand touched mine. The light surged, and for a moment, I felt peace, no fear, no loneliness, just wholeness. But then, from behind us, a shriek, a new voice. Brandon's, raw, terrified. Tyler, I turned. He stood at the edge of the chamber, bloodied, holding the photo in both hands like a shield. The version of him that had vanished. He was real, and he had come back for me. Don't let it finish. He yelled, pull away. I looked down. My hands were fading, fingers unraveling into static. My heartbeat slowed. The chamber pulsed with finality, but Brandon was running now toward the center. He tackled one of the other Tylers and screamed in my face, remember who you are. And I did. Brandon's voice ripped through the collapsing chamber like a flare in the fog. Tyler, look at me. He shook me hard. I blinked once, twice, and suddenly I saw it. He was solid, not shimmering, not duplicated, not bent at impossible angles like the others. He was real, and I was fading fast. My body wasn't a body anymore. It was a membrane, a border being dissolved, scraped away by the friction of merging cells. But Brandon held my shoulders, forced eye contact. His hands were cold, slick with blood, his or mine. I couldn't tell. He shouted again, you're not them. You're you. You're here. The other Tylers circled around us, voiceless now, their mouths agape but still moving, silently mouthing my name like a curse. The core pulsed. The final pull had begun. The chamber was breaking, not like a building collapses, but like an idea unraveling. Everything was concepts, now proximity, gravity, time fracturing into streams of unstructured logic. I gripped Brandon's arm, tried to speak, but only static poured from my mouth. Then he did something I never expected. He punched me right in the jaw. Pain surged through my skull. A white-hot snap. I tasted blood, real blood. My vision swam, and for one brief moment, the other versions recoiled. The pain had anchored me, grounded me. Brandon dropped to one knee, chest heaving. He pulled something from his backpack. It was the photo, the one I'd burned. I kept it, he said breathlessly. Don't ask me how. I don't know. It keeps coming back. He unfolded it, shoved it into my hands. Now everyone was in the photo. Even me, except we were in the chamber. Behind us, the object floated. But this time it was broken, cracked like glass. This is a paradox, he whispered. A feedback loop. That thing, it feeds on certainty, on anchored timelines. But if we bring a broken version into the living one, it dies. I finished, barely understanding. He nodded. Behind us, the shape pulsed again, no longer calm, but agitated. Some of the tilers began to scream. The no-mouth version disintegrated in a flash of negative light. Another turned and fled, vanishing into the black. The remaining cells pushed toward us, desperate now. They weren't angry, they were afraid. I shoved the photo toward the core. At first, nothing. Then, the object cracked. A seam of light burst through its surface. Another, then another. It began to scream. A sound with no origin, not auditory but spatial. Like every point in the room shrieking at once. I dropped to the floor. Brandon covered his ears, blood leaking from his nose. The shape imploded inward, fracturing space like a mirror being stepped on. I blacked out. When I opened my eyes, I was on the forest floor. Brandon lay beside me, groaning. Above us, pine trees swayed under a gray morning sky. No bunker, no hatch, just moss, dirt, and a bird song. I think, Brandon coughed, I think we closed it. We lay there for a long time, hours maybe, saying nothing, just breathing, just being. Later, we hiked back to the car in silence. The forest looked normal again, too normal, like it wanted to be forgotten. We reached the trailhead, filthy, starving, shaking, and when we climbed into the car, I asked him something I hadn't let myself consider until that moment. Do you remember Mark? He turned slowly, face pale. Who? His words echoed like a gut punch through the car. Who? Brandon looked confused for a second. Honestly confused, like the name Mark had never meant anything. Not to him, not ever. I wanted to scream, but instead, I just nodded, rolled down the window, and stared into the trees. We didn't talk the whole drive back to Portland. Every time I looked at him, I saw the flicker in his expression, like something behind his eyes was watching me, trying to mimic the old Brandon, trying to remember how he used to act, and failing. Maybe he was real, maybe he wasn't, maybe none of this was, but I remembered Mark, and that meant something. Back home, I couldn't sleep. The apartment felt unfamiliar, too symmetrical, too clean. I kept the lights on for a week. I checked my reflection constantly, waiting for the lag. The blink, the mismatched grin. Nothing came, but the photo remained. I taped it to the back of a drawer. It changed every day. Sometimes there were 5 of us, sometimes just one. Sometimes it showed places I'd never been, deserts, mountains, underground labs, and always in the center, the thing that had once pulsed like a heart, shattered and silent. Sometimes I looked closer. Sometimes the faces moved. One night, I made the mistake of searching online. I dug back into the missing persons lists. New entries, new photos, all too familiar. Campers, hikers, scientists, all reported lost near unmarked locations in forests across the Pacific Northwest. Some of them had our names. Some of them had our faces. I tried to warn people, posted on Reddit, sent tips to podcasters, contacted journalists. Nobody believed me. One guy even said my post was a copy-paste from some creepypasta he had read years ago. I asked him to send me the link. It led to a story posted in 2016. Same names, same location, same bunker, same ending, but I didn't write it. And it was dated 4 years before we went on that trip. So I deleted everything. Again, I shut off my phone, burned every printout, started working nights, avoiding mirrors, refusing to look at photographs. It's easier that way. Easier not to remember. Easier not to feed it. Because sometimes, when I'm drifting off to sleep, I hear a click, a shift in pressure, the low hum of a power grid powering back up, and I know the door is still there, somewhere in the dark, waiting, watching.